So we will jump right in, and anybody else that's still popping in, we'll let them pop in. And yeah, you can turn your camera on or off. There's kind of no right or wrong here. So like I said, if you have anytime we kind of go through this, if you have any questions on trust, on leadership that you want to throw in the chat, or kind of just wait till the end. So I'm going to do kind of 10 minutes of kind of the meat of it, and then we're going to get into questions at the end. So this is want to be cognizant of your time in the morning here. But just for those of you who don't know, I am Mikaela, and I grew up in Iowa, which Jalinda told me today. It's -10 there today, so be thankful if you're in the South. But I grew up in Iowa. I graduated from Iowa State University in marketing. After that, I spent 7 years in full-time ministry, and I worked 2 of those years in England, so across the pond. And then I came over here to South Carolina, where I've lived for about 10 years now. And I might mute you guys here, or mute yourself if you can, if you've logged in. Sorry here. You're in that background. I'm missing where to mute everybody. All right, I think we're all right. So yeah, I live now in South Carolina, and I get the privilege day in and day out of working with teams. I kind of say I help teams with their people problems, but also their people potential. So if you have kind of any dicey team dynamics, that's kind of my sweet spot: conflict resolution, communication, all that good stuff. But today we are talking about the wonderful area of trust. And trust is one of those kind of tricky leadership words, topics that, you know when you have it, and you know when you don't have it with someone. It's more of a feeling, right? You're like, I know I trust them, or I know I don't trust them, and I can't even tell you why I don't trust them, right? Often we're like, it's just a feeling, or it's a gut reaction that we feel with people. And what I want to do today is really break down these kind of what I call the 5 C's of trust. So to help you kind of say, when you get those feelings, whether it's with a coworker, a neighbor, a friend, that you say like, I know what it is, but I just don't trust them. You can maybe go through these 5 C's and be like, okay, I know what it is. It's that maybe they're not consistent. Maybe they don't have the right character that you're looking for in an individual. But we're going to dive right in. But before we do, I want you to think about, what is one relationship in your life that you would like to build greater trust with? So as we're kind of going through these, I want you to think about someone in particular. It could be 1 or 2 people, and it could be a working relationship you want to kind of improve on. It could be a spouse. It could be a neighbor. There's no right or wrong, but kind of think about, who is someone that it would be beneficial for me to build greater trust with. Okay, so hopefully you have that kind of person in mind. And the other kind of very key thing before we start that I want to emphasize with trust is that I kind of say, I go into teams and I say, what's the number one thing when you don't have this thing, you can't build anything else on? And a lot of the guys in manufacturing will be like concrete or rocks, and I'm like, it's trust, right? If you don't have trust, there's nothing to build on. So that's why I always focus on this when I go into teams, because if you don't have trust, it's really hard to have a hard conversation or a conflict resolution when you haven't built that foundation to begin with, right? So that's why this is so key. It's so important that we get it right. And the other key element before we dig in, I was with a team a few years ago, and it was our first leadership session, and we're all in there, the leadership team, and the president kind of right off the bat, he says, okay, now I need you all to just trust me that moving forward, this is what we're going to do, and I need you to just trust me. And I was a little bit like cringy already, because unfortunately, as we all know, trust is not just like given like that, right? It's earned, it's built, And so these are kind of the building blocks that you need, that we all need to build trust with one another. So right out the gate, the first one we want to talk about, the first C, is compassion. So I'm going to send you the notes and the recording of this as well. But the first C is compassion. So you have to trust that someone understands and is truly for you. So if you think about that first relationship that you're thinking about right now, maybe, scale of 1 to 10, what is the level of compassion that you feel like they have for you, maybe for the team, for the wider team, for your family? So compassion, this is things like empathy. This is things like a sense of when you share something, they maybe don't fully understand, but they're willing to kind of come to the table and listen and hear. That if they know you had a rough night or have had rough nights, they bring you Starbucks in the morning, right? So what is the level of compassion, empathy, understanding that this person shows to you? And this is where I see this, you hear a lot about emotional intelligence, right? This is where that emotional intelligence piece comes in, because if you don't have the greater level I see of emotional intelligence, that compassion, that empathy that you have, the greater trust gets built with each other. So that's kind of a key to think about, is what is the level of compassion this individual has? And is it evident? Is it genuine? Are they kind of vulnerable at the right times? So that's that first C. So the second C is kind of I would say the most obvious, and the one that's kind of especially in the workplace, is kind of a no-brainer, but it's, are they capable? Are they competent? Are they who you need them to be in terms of the job, right? Do they have the right skills, the right abilities, the right just capabilities for what you need them to do? You can trust that they are competent to show up how you need them to show up in terms of the physical task. And so this one is kind of the most kind of a softball and easy one, that someone gives you the resume and you find out pretty quickly, right, in the first couple of weeks, if they were. I think there's a team a while back that the first couple of weeks and months, we're like, I don't know if they were accurate on their resume, right? Like, they're not. We're training them, but yet we've probably all been there, for you HR world people out there. So that one, obviously, trust is quickly broken, and a kind of an easy one to see, to notice. But the other kind of little piece in this one of competence and capable is self-awareness. And this is also a piece of how well does someone know their strengths and weaknesses, right? Because I might say, oh, I'm a super great, organized person, right? And then you go into my house, or you go to my desk, and you're like, it's like chaos, right? And maybe they're missing a bit of that self-awareness. So it might not always be like blatant deception or dishonesty. Sometimes it's just that self-awareness piece that they don't have, that maybe need to be kind of addressed or confronted, if that makes sense. So take a second, think about the relationship you have in mind. What is, scale of 1 to 10, their level of that you can trust they're competent of what you need them to do? Okay, that's maybe an easy softball one, that one. All right, so the third one, and I put this right in the middle because to me it is the most important. I mean, they're all kind of important in their own right, but this one is super important because it's character. And this is, you trust that someone is who you need them to be. So think about this is, I would say, often where I see trust being broken, trust not hitting the mark, someone not being able to trust someone is in their character. It's maybe their honesty, their lack of integrity, their lack of secrecy or privacy or something, where they're not showing up in the way that you need them to be in terms of their character. And I would say this is the one that, in hiring especially, Man, if we could get the secret sauce of how to decipher, discern, and figure out someone's character in 90 minutes, like I'd be living on an island somewhere. But the resume, the competent piece, like those like we try and decipher in hiring, right? And in building that trust. But this is the one that often it takes time to really see someone's character. And the key part of this as well is, you trust someone is who I need them to be. So if you think about, say, a salesperson, right? They're on the road a lot. They're maybe have access to company card. Their schedules all over the place. I need to trust that my salespeople have good integrity with that credit card, right? I need to trust that they're honest when they're meeting with the clients, at 6 o'clock at night, and they're not going out and partying all night, that they're doing what they're supposed to do. Maybe it's a finance person. You need to trust that there's someone of, privacy and secrecy and truthfulness and honesty when they're going through the budget or whatever it is. So that's something, as you think about the relationship that came to mind for you, I want you to think about specifically, what are the character values that you need them to be day in and day out? Like, are there certain things that maybe, are specific for their role, specific for your guys' relationship? That's important, because this is often what I see needs to be addressed, maybe in hard conversations or where trust is broken. This piece is often hardest to define and often hardest to kind of know what you need and what the role needs, if that makes sense. So good, everybody kind of tracking? Feel free to put any comments, questions in the chat. Otherwise, we'll kind of keep it rolling here. So the fourth piece is connection. The fourth C is connection. So connection is, I need to trust that you're in alignment with me and you are in alignment with where we're going. There has to be an aligned vision, aligned purpose, aligned sense of direction. I can't be going on this path. You can't be going on this path. Maybe, your family, you guys have goals for the year. You can't have your husband having, one goal of like, I'm going to go to the gym at 6 a.m. And you're like, no, we need to get every morning a better routine and rhythm for our family. And I need you to be here, right? You can't have separate vision, separate goals. There has to be that connection piece of alignment. And where I see often this gets missed is you can have people in a room saying, oh yeah, that's our vision for this year. That's our goals for the team, the company. But where often I see this gets missed and trust gets kind of broken, you could say, is in those then you have the wider goals, the wider vision, but it's in those day-to-day priorities of, okay, how are we going to execute that? Because sales department might have one idea how they're going to execute that, right? What their day-to-day weekend priorities are. And, the finance team might have another idea. The production might have another idea on what the day-to-day priorities are. So you can say the same things, but it's in the day-to-day that it's like you're in alignment of what takes, it's that kind of everything's important, but nothing's important kind of thing. You have to be in alignment and that connection piece on day in and day out. We're prioritizing the right things together. Okay, so 30 seconds, think about your relationship and kind of that connection piece. Are you aligned on vision, values, purpose? All right, driving it home, number 5, and this I maybe see the most often is consistency. Consistency. Can you trust that what you've seen them do, they're going to do again and again and again, right? They're going to repeat their behavior, that they're going to show up how you need them to show up again and again and again and again. And maybe they 95% of the time get stuck in traffic or, don't show up, family situation coming up. but consistently day in and day out, they're who you need them to be. They're kind of all those above four things. They're who you need them to be. They have the right character, right? They have a sense of compassion. There's no like confusion on, wait, yesterday you kind of were like this, and now next week you're like this, and you're kind of all over the map, right? And talk about trust being broken. Like if you can't depend on someone to kind of, it's one thing if someone's like, awful day in and day out, you're like, okay, well, I can expect awfulness, right? But you need that consistency across the board. And this is, one thing I see a lot with teams is, right, you have someone that I say, they're like, well, they come 80% of the time, or they show up or they call in sick 20% of the time, right? And I'm like, well, how are they when they are there? And oftentimes they're great when they're here, right? It's just I can't get them to show up consistently, right? And so this is kind of, to me, the almost like the foundation of all of them, right? You need to be consistent again and again and again with all of these things. It doesn't mean we're perfect, and we all have life that happens, but there's that consistency. So think for a second on your relationships. It could be even a team dynamic on each of these 5 things. So again, we have compassion, trust that they are for you. There's that sense of empathy. We have capable, that they have the competence to do what you need them to do. Character, that they're who you need them to be. Connection, you're in alignment together with where you're going. And then that consistency of like again and again and again, all these things are happening. And the key I want to say with this as well is you can have all 4, kind of like I just said, you can have all 4 of the above, but if you don't have the consistency, trust is broken, right? You can have all like compassion, capable, character, consistency, and not have a sense of connection, and you're going to miss each other, right? And so it's why it's important, I think, to this, like so many leadership words. Trust is one of those big words of we think we all know what we mean, but what do we mean? And when we know that's the feeling we have, we know it's there, and when it's not there, but yet when I'm going to have a hard conversation with somebody and I know trust is the issue, this to me becomes very helpful, because then you can go into that hard conversation and not say, we just don't trust you. Like that's not helpful for them. That's not helpful in moving forward, because what do they do with that? They're like, oh, that's great. I stink at life, right? Nobody trusts me. But if you go in and you say, okay, we know you're for the team. When you show up, you're awesome. You're great. You work hard. We appreciate your integrity, that we can tell you're honest in things, but yet you're not consistently, coming in on time. You're not consistently coming to these meetings when you should, whatever it is, but you give them very specific action steps that give them the opportunity to build that trust, right? To do these very specific things that begin building and earning trust. And so kind of as I say all that, any kind of obvious or immediate or things I missed or areas I need to clarify, questions, anyone, or even just thoughts or feedback, or how you've seen any of this show up on your end, good, bad, or ugly? Or you can speak a question too.
Yeah, so I had a question about if the behavior that is leading to lack of trust, if it's more a cultural thing, like how do you address it with a specific person when it's also like a cultural thing? So say at your plant, people always show up late to meetings. So when you're telling someone, hey, you're consistently not on time, that, meetings with leadership, they're also, 15 minutes late to meetings. So how do you address that?
Yeah, great question. So let me kind of just pose it back to you. And is it Asia? Aya? Maybe go on mute if you can, or I can mute her, it looks like. Never mind. Okay. Great question. So I'm gonna kind of rephrase it, make sure I'm tracking. Kind of saying like if the culture itself is one where there's not a level of consistency we'll use, there's not a level of accountability in terms of the things that you would need to build trust with the wider team or the organization isn't there. Is that what you're kind of saying? How do you
Yeah.
address that?
Or if you're in that dialogue with someone in particular and you're saying, hey, um, things are going really well in these areas, this area, I'm looking for improvement so that we can continue to build trust. And that person says, well, I'm not the only one. Like, this
Mm,
is a cultural problem.
yeah.
And I'm the first one being held accountable and being asked to change. So how do you engage in that sense?
Yep.
When you do recognize that it is a cultural thing, but you have to start somewhere.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the first kind of thing I'll address is that cultural piece. And that's a great thing to think about. Like if you're in a team, in an environment, in a culture, in an organization where you realize a lot of these things aren't happening to the degree that you kind of have to gauge, is this a place I even want to be in? Right. And you have to gauge your level of importance with each of these things with the people around you. Like maybe there's a couple people on the team you connect with. And is that enough for you to stay and be a part of maybe the wider vision, even though a lot of the other team members aren't happening? So to me, there's that question of like, if you're part of a team or a group that isn't hitting all of these C's, that you would want, that you'd want to feel totally 100% a part of, like, do they hit enough that you can stay there for until you find the next thing, right? So to me, there's kind of that wider question to think about if that's you. But then like say you have stayed and you're like get that response from someone that they're like, well, Joe's doing it. Why do I have to whatever? And that's when I would kind of figure out where is your level of trust with this person. So say you're meeting with Sally, right? And Sally says that to you. She's like, well, Joe shows up late all the time, right? Why do I have to show up on time? And that's when I would pull in whatever seeds of trust you have built with this individual. Maybe you've connected with her on, she's going through some hard family stuff, right? Or maybe you've connect with her on whatever level you can to say, yeah, but is that really like, I get it, but is that the kind of people we want to be? Right? Is that the kind of environment we want to create? Like, do you think us together we could try and shift the tide? And maybe she'd be like, maybe it'll be beautiful and she'll be like, yes, let's shift the tide. But maybe she wants to go and show up late all the time too. But I would say in that dynamic, figure out where might there be a connection piece of influence with that person. And if it's not with that person, see where else it can be with other people that you're like, oh, wow, a lot of these values align with these other people. Like, let's at least make it as good as it can for us five, us four, if we're going to stay here, right? If we're going to be in this place that it's not ideal. Um, and you kind of make do. But I would say connect with her wherever you can, have a connection piece. Maybe it's kind of praising her in her job. And, I see the potential you have. I see, like, uh, will you go with me in this new direction? Kind of appeal to whatever thing might appeal to her. Well, Megan, what are your thoughts as I say all that? You're like, it's not
Yeah.
gonna work. Try again.
No, that sounds good. Yeah, I think before having the conversation, it's kind of, what is the chances of success that I think I might have based on the other C's that I have with this particular person.
Very
And I think that the approach of being like it's very constructive. It's pointing out the specific behavior of saying, hey,
Mm,
this is an area of improvement I can see that will even deepen our trust even more because I see all these benefits. And then it's really up to that person to say, okay, yeah, like I'm in.
yeah,
And
yeah,
if they're not, they're like, no. I'm like, you probably, you don't have anything to lose with this, because if they were like, no, I don't care. All that you got was the same thing. Like you,
right,
but at least with trying that way
yeah,
and trying to say, yeah, I get Joe does that, but we're talking about you and me, not you, me and Joe, or that kind of thing. So
yeah. Yeah, great and great point. I think to have a sober expectations on if you go through all the C's and you're like, really, this person and I only have like one C that we connect on, really. To have a sober reality of probably how that conversation's gonna go is that's a good point. Jenny, I see you raised your hand there.
Good morning, and
Morning.
thank you so much. Thank you so much for having us. Um, I just wanted to, I guess, kind of piggyback on what Megan
Yeah.
said at the end. That it does have to be a two-way street, and I think someone in the chat asked the question, "How do you build trust with someone that has no self-awareness?"
Mhm.
They don't see what they do and how it affects other people.
Right.
So oftentimes, you may try to build trust with a person and have that open conversation, but if
Yeah.
they're not in a place that they're able to
Mm.
um, do some self-reflection and kind of figure out what is it
Yeah.
that's causing my coworker or what
Mhm.
have you to feel that way or not to feel comfortable
Yeah.
around me,
Yeah.
um, then it's kind of like a lost cause. It
Right.
can be a lost cause. So I
Yeah.
think the first step is self-awareness of ourselves, and
Absolutely.
then also being open enough to receive that kind of not criticism, but maybe just
Feedback.
um
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
feedback.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great point because I probably should have started with, and I'll credit to Jenny on this one, is before you even think about another relationship, think about these 5 C's for yourself, right? How am I showing up and being understanding, empathetic to the people around me, to that relationship, right? Maybe how am I being all of these things, like do your own self-awareness, self-reflection piece. But like you, the question was in the chat, how do you build trust with someone that has no self-awareness? You hit them upside the head is what you do. No, right, is what we all want to do, right? You get your stress ball and you stress, so you don't hit them, right? Yeah, throw it at them. So it's a great point because, right, all of these things kind of can feel like they become mute when the person's like oblivious to almost the world around them, right? They live in their kind of Joe Lane and Joe's world, and life is good with Joe, right? Poor Joe, he's getting beat up today. But that self-awareness piece, and that's when it comes back to that first C, compassion, right?
Babe,
Because
can you bring out the towels when you're done?
there we go. Because in order to build self-awareness, one place that feels like someone like has no understanding of how they impact others, how they go about, right? The first step I always see is I just did this with a couple different teams actually, where I would get all the feedback I could from other people that work with them, right? Because I want to know if they have any sense of number one, compassion, empathy, understanding for how people are experiencing their interactions, right? If they're a bit blunt, or if they're a bit forceful, if they're a bit, they don't listen well to others, right? There's some of the things where and the feedback was coming in and people were being honest and they're hearing directly from their team. It was, some was anonymous, some was had a name attached, where I want to know, is that affecting them, right? Was that moving the dial for them to say, oh whoa, I did not realize like I was coming across as that, right? And so if there's not a significant degree of empathy for understanding how they're being experienced from others, To a degree, for some people, there's not much more I can do, others can do. Like they almost need to hit their own rock bottom. And like in this other work situation I'm experiencing, is this individual, she's having to have significant consequences put on her for her to, right, almost to have a wake-up call, for her to say, okay, the feedback came in, that wasn't good. You weren't paying attention to that, right? That didn't produce enough empathy for change. Now consequences are put on, you've been demoted, right? Your pay, you're in a trial period. That's not seeming to move the dial, right? And so, then it's almost like an addict, right? Like you kind of have to let them kind of crash and burn to see if that will wake them up. And so I always, with self-awareness, I always try and get as much feedback as I can to see if that moves them a bit. And there's personality assessments I can do with people as well. The personality assessments I like because that shows me their level of understanding their own self-awareness and can they see in themselves what others see as we go through some of those things. Great question. I'm gonna kind of keep rolling here. Do you have any recommendations on learning to deal with difficult personalities? Sure. I'll say again, the personality assessments that I have, I really think are good, are helpful. Again, you kind of discern their level of empathy, self-awareness. I would say again, there's that to me that we could do a whole webinar just on that because there's so much. I don't know, Kim, if you want to kind of add a little more detail to that question because there's so much with difficult personalities. Like it could be a communication thing, right? It could be how someone might have a high tolerance for conflict and someone might be very conflict avoidant, right? So in terms of difficult personalities, I would say I would need more specifics on what's the dynamic there, because it might adjust what I recommend. Go ahead, someone. Question, someone? Another good question here. How do you build trust or have compassion for an individual who really thinks they never do anything wrong? It's always someone else. So we've all had that person, right? Who they're the victim, they're the forever victim, they're can do no wrong. And I would say I would do all these things where you try and have the conversation, go through the C's, specifically say, this is where I am needing you to show up more, and give them opportunity to take accountability. And the reality is, if they never do that, if they choose to be the victim, if they, you can, if you feel comfortable, you can say, I notice when because all of a sudden now you're having a different conversation, right? The conversation now is about how they're responding to feedback. I notice every time we have these feedback discussions, you get defensive and you kind of point the blame and finger, and I get that, right? We all get defensive. It's natural, it's normal. But for there to be any kind of movement together for us, I kind of need to see where you take responsibility and where, they take responsibility, or however the dynamics are. So give them these opportunities to take responsibility. And at the end of the day, the reality is, if they aren't someone who can do that, then you can't build trust, right? They haven't proved that there's someone that's trustworthy, that has earned that trust. You can have compassion for them, because I get that question a lot where they're like, and I had this situation happen the other day where someone was like, making all these excuses for them, right? They've had a traumatic past or they've gone through a hardship. And I said, that can be separate. You can have compassion for someone, you can have empathy for someone and where they're at. That does not excuse behavior, right? They may have a grace period where they're kind of working through stuff. But again, if there's a pattern of consistency of them being the victim, of them doing these things, you can't build trust. You can have compassion, hope the best, keep your boundaries. But at the end of the day, they're responsible for them. And also you're responsible for you and also your emotions. A lot of times I see people take on the emotions of other people and feel guilty and I need to help more. And that's kind of a fine line that you have to be really careful. But that's a tough, good question. Yes, dealing with unfriendly and manipulative people is spot on with that one. You are right. Let me keep going here. Anybody can chime in too with a question or thought. I think direct examples of person's behavior is important. Many times people have things explained to them or pointed out without good examples. So they not may take it to heart because it might cut them off, right? Is your opinion not subjective or constructive? Very true. And I know a lot of you in the HR world, like that's your sweet spot, right? Give examples, give specifics. And that's another thing with each of these things is you can, if you're struggling with someone and even identifying where are we missing each other? Where do I not trust this person? Make a list of just their ongoing behavior, because maybe you can't even identify it in one of these C's, but you can identify it in their behavior and just start making a log. And I kind of say anytime there's a pattern of 3+ more examples, you have a pattern, right? You have a consistency. You have something that probably needs to be addressed. So I agree. Examples are everything, both to them and you. It's kindness to them and kindness to you. Any other, I think I've hit all the questions. Any other questions, any other thoughts that come up for you guys? I know I kind of have us out in 5 minutes. So obviously you can email me any more thoughts, questions. I'll send out some more resources. I had someone email me before and say what to do if trust is broken. And the analogy I always like to use with that one is, one, you have to kind of discern the degree of trust that's broken, right? It's why people get divorced because the magnitude of trust has been so largely broken, there's no way forward. But so degree, the level of repair that needs to happen. And the other example I like to use from Brene Brown, she talks about trust as like, it's little moments over time where trust is built, right? So say you have this marble jar and every time trust is built with someone, you put a little marble in the jar, right? And slowly over time, the jar gets bigger, it gets stronger, more marbles. But then all of a sudden trust is broken and it's almost like a hand comes in, whole bunch of marbles come out and all that work, right? That took time and little by little is just gone. And so to remember when trust is broken, it takes, again, depending on the degree and magnitude, it takes time. It takes little by little by effort. And lots of check-ins are good in that time of repairing to say, is trust being built back? Am I earning your trust back? The power is in the one that trust was hurt to say, yes, it is, or no, it isn't. You know, that person can't say, well, I'm doing all the things, trust should be built. Like, again, it doesn't work like that. If you know, trust is earned, it's built, all that good stuff. So I'd love to hear from you guys as well. I know I only got a couple minutes, but if you have any more questions, let me know. And then I'd also love to hear from you. Shoot me an email. I'd love to hear, you know, things your team's doing to build trust that's works really well, challenges you're having. Kind of give me the good, bad, and ugly, because it kind of helps me grow and build as well. So last thoughts, comments, anything?
Someone in the chat was asking for you to just recap the 5 C's again.
Yes, and I will send out a handout too with them, but they are compassion, trust that, trust they understand you and are for you, compassion, empathy, understanding. Number 2, capable. So that's that trust they are competent to do what you need them to do. Number 3, character. Trust that they are who you need them to be. Connection. Number 4, trust that you guys are in alignment together of the vision, the purpose, the values, and again, the day-to-day priorities of what's important, what takes precedent. And then lastly, consistently, that through all these things, they're going to show up again and again and again on repeat. They're going to have a track record of who they are, who you need them to be again and again and again consistently. So again, that's kind of trust. I'm sure I'm missing a million things as we try and unpack the greatest foundation of all relationships in 45 minutes. But let me know if you have any more questions, thoughts, any last comments, questions. Otherwise, I'll send us out to go build trust with all the people in our life. Good. And let me know, I'm going to be doing these once a month. So let me know if you have any hot topics. I'm thinking next month we're going to do conflict. So, you know, everyone loves that one. Bring your stress balls. And we'll maybe dive into that one. So thank you guys. Appreciate you jumping in, coming in. Thank you for the questions. And we will see you when I see you. Thank you all. Have a good day. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.